Hey everybody, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 23 of the Road to Latin textbook, specifically the story Dukes et Milites. Now in this chapter you're going to be introduced to a new set of grammar, so before you dive too far into the story, the first thing that I always tell you is to try to make sure that you have the grammar and the vocab under control. And to help you, if you want to take a look at my website, you can find everything you need there. You can find all the vocabulary, some derivatives, Quizlet to help you practice. In terms of the grammar, you can find all the notes, videos, just things that'll help you understand it a little bit better. You can dive right into the story if you want and learn it that way. It's totally up to you. I just think it's always better to make sure that you have the vocab and grammar under control so that these stories are kind of highlighting the grammar for you. So like I said, the first thing you want to do, make sure you have the vocab. The second thing would be go into the grammar, which is what we're going to do in a second. Another thing you want to do is make sure that when you read this, you're finding a partner. I tell you this all the time. But you want to do what we call the read and reread method, where you read it once, you write down any problem areas you're having, and then keep reading it until the story makes sense. And part of that is reading it out loud. You never want to just translate in your head. So if you can find a partner in class, someone that you could read it to practice your speaking and pronunciation, and then they'll read it back to you so you can practice your listening, that's really important. You don't want to shut off those two areas of your brain. You might just be more of an auditory learner, right? So you don't want to just look at the words and try to figure it out. Bring the language to life, right? It'll really help you catch the patterns, particularly the listening part I found. And again, it's always good to just do this as many times as you can until you're not living in the dictionary or constantly looking up grammar. So again, that whole idea of read and reread, get to a point where you can actually read this as a story and not be stuck, and then you know you've got it under control. But to start, I just want to give you a little bit of grammar background. So like I said, there's a new set of grammar for this chapter, and it's talking about nouns and declensions. So the first thing we want to do is just do a quick recap. So you might remember we've been saying since the beginning of this book that all the Latin nouns we have, we organize into groups called declensions. It's just a fancy way of saying a group. And the nouns in a declension, so if two nouns are in the same declension, they're using the same endings. That's how they work, right? It's about tracking patterns is really what it is, patterns of endings. So far, you've been dealing with two declensions, what we call first and second. The first declension words are the ones that end in A, and the second declension words have been the ones that end in US, right? That's basically the breakdown. And we know what declension a noun belongs to by looking at its genitive singular ending. That's kind of the key so that you know. So if you look a word up in the dictionary and you see that the genitive singular, which is the second part of the dictionary entry, so in other words, in this example, puella, puellae, the I there, the AE. If you see an AE there, you know you're looking at a first declension noun. That's really useful because now we know what endings it's going to use. You know that it's going to use I, R, M, E, sa, sis, right? You don't have to guess at what ending to look at. You know what column you're in. For second declension, you're looking for a long I. So the example would be hortus, horti, right? Garden. The long I, the second piece there is the genitive singular. It's telling you this is a second declension noun. Okay? So now we're going to introduce another group, though, and this is the third declension. And the reason we held off on this in the book is because it's a bit more of a wild card. So with third declension nouns, right, this third group, the genitive singular is an IS. So an example would be the word dux, which means leader, which is part of the name of this chapter, right, Dukes et Milites. So when you see dux, ducus, there's a couple things kind of going on here. One, the genitive doesn't have an X and the nominative does. That's a little weird. We'll talk about it. And the other thing is that you have that IS ending there. Right? So that gives it away as being third declension. And like we just said, the nominative singular is kind of a wild card. There is no pattern in the third declension, right? It could be a bunch of different endings. So to give you an example, here's 4 third declension nouns. Look at the first part of each and you'll see what I'm talking about. The first word is dux, which means leader. It ends in an X. Okay. The second word is canis, which means dog. That ends in an IS. Actually, canis is the same in the nominative singular as the genitive singular, which is kind of confusing. Then you have eques, which means a horseman, right? If you pluralize it, it's cavalry. The genitive is equitus. We added a T. So you can already see the pattern's a little bit screwy. Then you have mater, right? Mater, matris, which means mother. All 4 of these words have a nominative singular that's spelled differently. You have an X, you have an IS, an ES, an R, or ER rather. So what's going on here, right? What's really happening? And this is what we mean when we say that the third declension doesn't have a set pattern in the nominative singular, something that makes it really different. Okay, so if we put it all together, these are all the noun endings that you've seen so far. You have the first declension, then you have the second declension, masculine and neuter, and now we have third, which can usually be masculine or feminine, right, is what you're going to see. So a couple things to notice. Third declension, nominative singular, is a dash. Again, it doesn't mean that there's no ending there. It just means there's not a set pattern. This table is all about patterns, right? That's really what declensions are doing. You want to remember that nominative and vocative are always the same thing. So if the nominative is a dash, the vocative will be a dash. So in other words, if I want to address like a mother, maybe you'd say, "Hey, mom," right? It would be spelled mater. You're using the vocative the same as the nominative. Okay. Now in the plural, it gets much more simplified. We do have a set ending for third declension nominative plural. It's es, but you'll notice there's an overlap with accusative plural, right? So this is something you got to unpack in this chapter. How can you tell between a nominative and an accusative plural noun in third declension, right? Nominative and accusative are doing two completely different things, but they're using the same ending, and it's really all about context. So that's all this chapter is doing. It's just giving you a different set of nouns, right? It's totally fine. Use them the same way. The cases all mean the same thing. But the noun endings are a little bit tricky, right? You have to really look at this chart and try to practice it or memorize it if you want, because it does look a little different from first and second declension. But at the end of the day, one way to think about it is, so far, if a noun doesn't end in an A or a US or UM if it's neuter, it's probably a third declension noun. Okay. So once you have all that, you feel good about the vocab, the grammar, right? Again, if this didn't make sense to you, you want to pause the video and go back and actually look through the grammar. But if you feel like you're in a good place to read the story, now you can start it up, right? Read through it and just compare to what we're about to do right now to make sure you're on the right track. So this story starts like this. You have dux bellum ama. The word dux, right, leader, is nominative singular. That's the subject. So you're saying the leader loves war, right? Bellum, warfare. Libenter dux armatos ad bellum duce. So gladly, libenter, gladly or happily, however you want to translate that. The leader, the dux, right? He ducit, he leads armatos. Armatos is accusative plural. It means armed men, soldiers, right? So gladly, the leader leads, right? And you can see how those two words are related. He leads soldiers ad bellum, to war, right? That's what a general or a leader does. Then you have vita ducis periculorum est plena. So the life of a leader, here's the genitive singular, right? Ducis, right? For third declension, the is gives it away. The life of a leader is plena. It's full of dangers. Periculorum is genitive plural. So these genitives are kind of stacked next to each other. You just want to look at the whole phrase and you'll understand how they fit. It's saying the life of a leader or the life of a general is full of dangers. Sed ducis virtus est magna. But the virtus, right, the virtue of a leader, ducis, there's your genitive singular, is big, is great, est magna, right? So the virtue, the bravery, you might say, right, is great. So they're very kind of like strong leaders. Then you have duci patria est cara. So the fatherland, patria, est cara, it's dear. This is one of our special adjectives. It's dear to something. It's dear to the leader. There's our dative, right? So this chapter, the first three lines are giving you repetition on nominative singular, genitive singular, and now dative singular. It's just going through the list for you. So the fatherland or the country is dear to the leader. Saepe patria ducem voca. So often the fatherland, patria, the country, right, calls the leader, ducem. There's your accusative singular form, right, of a third declension noun, the em ending. So often the fatherland calls the leader. Tum ad duce armati ad bellum ducuntur. So then, meaning after the leader is called, then armed men, armati is my subject. There's my nominative plural, right? Armed men, ducuntur, they are called ad bellum, to war. Ducuntur is present passive. So you're saying they are called to war. And the reason we did passive is because passive takes the ablative of agent. So that's what's happening here. It's a way of showing you the ablative singular form of the word dux, right? A third declension noun. You're saying the soldiers are led to war ad duce, by the leader, right? There's your ablative. So in this first, paragraph, you might say, or first chunk of the paragraph, you're getting repetition on nominative singular, genitive singular, dative singular, accusative singular, and ablative singular, right? You're seeing them all in context, which is really good. Then you keep going. You have erant apud Romanos, multi et clari duces. So there were among the Romans, apud Romanos, multi et clari. These two adjectives are describing duces, and the et is just showing you that they're connected. So there were many famous, clari means famous, leaders, duces. There's your nominative plural. How do we know it was nominative plural? It's the only thing that works as the subject. Duces is going with erant. There were leaders, right? And since duces, right, leaders, dukes is a masculine word, that's why your adjectives are nominative plural using that masculine ending rather for adjectives, the long I. That's how this all ties together. You're saying there were among the Romans many famous leaders. Then you have statuae ducum clarorum in foro Romano videbantur. So the statues of famous leaders, ducum is genitive plural. This is one of the weird things about third declension, that ending, it feels right like that it should be accusative, because for the longest time we've been seeing as accusative singular in second declension. This is why it's important to know what group or declension your noun belongs to, because the endings are starting to overlap. Ducum, right? Dux is a third declension noun, so we know that has to be genitive plural. So that's why we're translating it statues of the leaders, and their clarorum, right? Of famous leaders, videbantur, the statues were seen in Foro Romano, in the Roman Forum, right? So they had statues up of the leaders. Then you have bellum ducibus Romanis erat semper gratum, quod spolia erat multa. So warfare, or war, right? Bellum was erat. It was always gratum. It was always pleasing. That's one of our adjectives that takes a dative. Who was it pleasing to? Ducibus Romanis, to Roman leaders. Again, this is just to show you what that dative plural form looks like, the ibus. So warfare, war, was always pleasing to Roman leaders because, quote, spolia erat multa. There were many spoils, or you might even say the spoils were many. It's talking about the sort of loot that you'd take after you win a battle. So this is why the leaders like warfare, because they get a lot of spolia out of it, a lot of spoils, right? War loot, or war booty, you might say. Then you have nos duces Romanos laudamus et fabulas de ducibus legimus. So we, nos, there's your subject, we laudamus, we praise. Who do we praise? The duces Romanos, Roman leaders. It's accusative plural. So again, how did I know duces is accusative plural? Well, my verb is laudamus, which means we are praising. So duces couldn't be nominative, right? It's not the subject, because I'm not saying they were praising, I'm saying we were praising. That's how I know this is accusative. The other way you can tell is Romanos is describing duces, and Romanos is very clearly accusative plural. And they have to be the same case number and gender, because they're going with each other, right? It's an adjective describing a noun. So you're saying nos, we praise the duces Romanos, right, the Roman leaders, and legimus, we tell, right, the subject is still nos, we read rather, fabulas, stories, right? We read stories de ducibus, about leaders. There's your ablative plural, right? And you'll notice that in third declension, ablative and dative plural are the same ending ibus. So it's saying we praise the Roman leaders and we read stories about leaders, okay? Then you switch gears a little bit. You have miles bellum amat, a soldier, right? Or the soldier loves bellum, war, right? So it's a side thought. We had the leader, now we have the soldier. Miles is an interesting word. That es ending looks like it should be plural, but if you look in the dictionary, miles is actually the singular form, the nominative singular. It would fall into that dash on our noun ending chart. This is why I'm telling you the third declension, right? The nominative singular is kind of the Wild West. It could be a bunch of different things. Miles is definitely nominative singular. So you're saying the soldier loves war. Virtus militis est magna, the virtue or the bravery, the courage, however you want to translate virtus, of the soldier, right? There's genitive singular, is great, est magna. Victoria militi est grata. So victory is grata. It's pleasing to the soldier. Same thing, dative, because you have that special adjective, grata. Itaque pro patria diligente pugnat. So itaque, he fights, meaning the soldier fights, diligente, diligently, right? He fights well, you might say. Pro patria, for his country, for the country, you might say for the fatherland, but really for his country, okay? Then you have pax quoque militem delectat, et a milite laudator. Here's another third declension noun, pax, peace. That's the nominative singular form. It would be in the dash. So peace also delights, delectat, right? They're going together, both singular subject, singular verb. So peace also delights the militem. There's your third declension accusative singular ending. It delights the soldier. And laudator, it is praised, meaning peace is praised, laudator, by the soldier. A milite, there's your ablative of agent. So again, this is all a repetitive way of showing you third declension nouns. They're using dukes, they're using pax, and they're using miles, right? Soldier, leader, peace. They're all third declension nouns, and you're getting the repetition of how they all look in context. Then we keep going, and you have another sort of repetitive phrase. You have apud Romanos erant multi et clari milites. This is the same phrase we saw, but instead of dukes, right? Duces, it's milites. So you're saying among the Romans, there were many famous soldiers, right? Not generals, but soldiers. Victoriae militum Romanorum erant multi. So the victories, nominative plural, right? The victories of Roman soldiers, there's that third declension genitive plural again, militum Romanorum. The victories of Roman soldiers were many, multi, or you might say there were many victories of Roman soldiers, right? They win a lot. Saepe magni triumphi agebantur. So often, saepe magni triumphi, right? Great triumphs. There's your subject, right? Plural subject. They're often great triumphs agebantur. They were held or led, you might say. Kind of put on is one way to think of it. They were held, is probably a good way to say. So there were a lot of triumphs. Remember, triumph here is a specific term talking about a military parade. So if you have an army or a general who does something great, conquer someone, you might get a triumph, and you get to parade through the streets of Rome, showing off all the great stuff that you took, right? And celebrating your victory, your triumph, literally. Then you have triumphi et ducibus et militibus erant grati. So triumphs were erant, they were grati, they were pleasing. Remember, we're going to be going dative here. So you have they were pleasing to the leaders, ducibus, and to the militibus, to the soldiers. Et means both. So you can say it was, triumphs were pleasing both to the leaders and the soldiers, right? They both like it. Then you have populus Romanus milites laudabat, quod multa spolia ad ducibus militibusque rather, Romam portabantur. So the Roman people, the populus Romanus, they laudabat, they praise, or they were praising, milites, the soldiers, because multa spolia, many spoils, there's my subject, portabantur, many spoils were carried back, you might say, Romam, to Rome, right? Who was carrying this stuff back? Ab ducibus et ad ducibus militibusque. So by the leaders and by the soldiers. The QUE on the end of militibus is just meaning and. It's an enclitic. You stick it on the end of the word, it means and. So it's saying the reason the Romans love, right, or praise the soldiers is because they're bringing back a lot of spoils, right? Literally many spoils were brought back, were carried to Rome by leaders, ducibus, and by soldiers, militibus. Then you have this final phrase. You have lex antiqua erat, victori sunt spolia. So this is saying there was, erat, a lex antiqua, an ancient law. Victori means like to the victor, it's dative. So to the victor, there are spolia, there are spoils. You might translate this as to the victor, go the spoils. That's really the idiom they're getting at here. Okay, so hopefully this story made some sense, and the grammar before it. There's a lot kind of going on here with third declension nouns. It is fairly new, so again, I'd recommend that you really go back and study the grammar, make sure you have it all under control. But if you have the grammar, pretty well known, and you have a really strong grasp on the vocab, you should be able to read this without too much difficulty, okay? And if you run into a problem, again, pause, right? Take a note and be like, okay, I don't understand this word or this phrase. Keep reading. And when you're done with the full read through, go back and look at your list of either words you didn't understand or phrases, fill in all those blanks and keep reading it until you can do this without needing to look up words and without needing to look up any grammar. Once you hit that place, you'll know that you're really good at this and that you're in a good place to move forward and that you understand the story. Good luck with it. If you have any problems at all or any questions, put them in the comments below and I'd be happy to help.